Thank you so much for joining us today. And without much ado, over to you, Kannan.
Thank you, LV, and Venki. Thank you so much for setting that context that came straight from the heart. What a way to get this entire, Power of I conference started, and that has really, really raised the bar. Uh, Welcome, participants, delegates for this conference, and I'm truly delighted to be sharing this panel with my fellow colleagues, Aditi, Swati, Jaskaran, and Shalini. I don't see Shalini's picture in the screen.
Shalini, could you please turn your camera on? Thank you.
Thank you. And, when we talk about inclusion, I think, long years ago when people used to talk about inclusion, one thing that came to my mind was about why are we making so much of a noise about this? Isn't it a done thing? Isn't it something that we should be always looking at? Why are we talking so much about it? Until I realized that, uh, if you don't intentionally include, you will unintentionally exclude. And I learned that from small experiences, anecdotes, where my children said something or somebody in the family said something. And then I realized that inclusion is not about you come to work, you switch on, you become inclusive, and you go back from work, you switch off. You bring your whole self to work. And that's why it's very important. And equally important is not about understanding and knowing about inclusion. Equally important is how am I showing this up in my everyday behavior? And as leaders, this is where we throw that light. We are like the lighthouse. Everybody is looking up to us and seeing, are we walking the talk? Are we not only, we are not just setting practices and processes, but we are also walking the talk. And then it becomes part of your DNA. And this is the kind of conversation that we're going to have in this panel discussion. And I'm super excited to hear each one of my panel members talk about their experience, their journey. And I'm opening up this panel to share your personal experience, personal thought for a couple of minutes before we get deep dive into the subject. So Aditi, we can start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Kannan. And once again, I consider it an honor and a privilege to be sharing my thoughts with all of you today, this afternoon, and being on the same panel as my other co-panelists. So, let me start with the stories of my failures before I talk about what it makes me today and what it brings me there. So many years ago, before DEI became, I would say became words that became so natural to us, got embedded in our everyday lexicon. I was trying to we were trying to work with, you know, looking at colleagues with different abilities and seeing that maybe we should diversify and try to do something in that area. When we started doing that, I mean, to our shock, we realized that some of the even most basic things, for example, accessibility to our offices, forget the accessibility to the building. I mean, that's still a builder's choice, and we wouldn't have thought about it when we took the lease many years ago. But even the accessibility to our offices, the way the flap barriers were, the way the meeting room doors used to open, the way the washrooms were, I mean, even those basics were not ready. I think for me, it was such a shock to realize that things that we take for granted are not really conducive. So Kannan, the point you made that unless you intentionally include, you will end up excluding. I think that so very resonates with me. So at that point of time, we decided to do a complete infrastructure audit to see actually where we stood. We had to make a lot of changes. Oh my God, we weren't anywhere near to be ready to have colleagues with different abilities come up at that point of time. But that one incident was such a huge eye opener for me, and hence what you said, Kannan, completely resonated. But
Wonderful.
the failure didn't stop then. So we get the first 5 or 6 people, the first batch. They get placed in different teams basis the skill sets and matches that we could do. And again, to my dismay and surprise, all of them left us within a year.
Mm.
Usually, the manager said that they weren't able to perform. And then it brought up again the questions: what is the framework we are using to assess performance in situations like this? Were our performance assessment frameworks the same? Were our expectations of the managers and their expectations of the people who were
Yeah.
joining the same? What did we do to make that difference, to be actually be able to include, right?
Yeah.
So
Aditi,
again,
I'm going to stop you here because I'm going to come back to this conversation so that
sure.
we can have a much deeper discussion. And I wanted to talk about all of these experiences as we go
Sure.
along for the rest of the 20 minutes, 40 minutes, right? Shalini, you want to share your thoughts, opening remarks?
Right, of course, sure. So I know that we are obviously here for a much wider cause, but probably to start with my personal journey. And now, and I know the introductions have happened, but in my current role as a technologist, I also run the or lead the D&I gender balance activities for the organization at NatWest. So I'm going to just start by a short, story that you would have heard probably from. Sudha Murthy, who was the co-founder of Infosys, and she kind of starts by saying many a times mentions that as a young graduate engineer, she was looking at applying for a role at there was an ad in the college campus which said that we are looking at hiring for Telco Pune, but women need not apply. That was, I think, in the 1970s or 1974, I think is what she had called out those days. However, she was very intrigued and she wrote to JRD and she said that, you are in a way eliminating 50% of your population by not looking at hiring women in the workforce. And JRD, being the visionary that he was, he kind of hired her immediately. I think she was the first woman engineer to be hired in Telco Pune. And why I say that is also because 25 years after that, I was also hired at Telco Pune as an engineer. But what was different was that I was one of we were 6 engineers in a batch of 60. So in so many years, not much had changed in the sense that we started with 1 woman engineer, we had 6. So really, it took so many years for us to make that difference. Where we are today, we know that our workforce, in the engineering space, has now almost touched about 25 to 26%. So we've come a long way, and I think when I reflect back on my career journey as a woman in technology, I kind of believe that it's a time to pay forward. It's a time to look at how we can bring more to the workforce. So I think that's really where I would want to start. But of course, I know there are a lot of other things. But handing over back to you, Kannan.
Wonderful, wonderful. That must be a very illustrious career that you have come through, and can't wait to hear more about it. Swati.
Yeah, so I think, Kannan, hi everyone. I have always had a journey in HR. So, and HR typically is more gender balanced as a function. So for the periods that I grew early in my career, I used to not like anything called diversity, inclusion. I used to actually run away from those because I always felt that, you're undermining my journey to get here, and I'm not in the room because of a quota. I'm here because I belong. And I went with that for many, many, many years. Had a child, I still continued blessed by the business leaders around me. But then I realized that for 2 days, if I didn't have support, I struggled and then felt that imagine if I didn't have the blessing. So there is a part of me which knows that I'm here because of the ecosystem I have. And not everyone can have that ecosystem or
Right.
has the blessing for that. And that is when I realized that equality is not equal to equity,
Yeah.
and not one size will fit all. And assuming that if you could do it, it means that it's a straight road for everyone else is unfair. And that is where my journey started personally, where I had to acknowledge that I have to pay it forward. There is no other way of making it better. The 1 to a 6 to a hopefully 60, Shalini, has to happen when we take charge. So
Yeah.
that's my story.
Yep. Super, super. Wonderful. Jaskaran, what do you have to say?
Well, thank you, Kannan. And first of all, congratulations to Avtar on their 25 years of doing all the good work within this space. I would share my story of exclusion, which kind of like has hit me at different stages of my life. As a child, I was quite tall. I was dark, skinny, introvert, and that kind of like didn't allow me to make a lot of friends. And as I continued, I grew up in Chandigarh, but then I moved to Delhi, didn't have that kind of financial independence where all resources were available to me. But again, made me feel that why am I being different? And as a child, it's very difficult to resonate with it as to why I'm being treated differently than others. And to the extent that when I worked outside India, again, to be labeled, in some sense to what Shalini and Swati has already said, to be labeled as that visible minority and to be actually called out that. And again, it hit me that, what world are we living in? Are we not humans first? Yeah. And that's where, I would say like, it really dawned about to me that it really made a personality change in me. I had a lot of self-doubt, as Dr. Soundarya said, that negative bias really set into me. And I was really thinking that, is something wrong with me as per se? But when my story really changed is when I became a parent with a daughter, and I really wanted everything for her, and I really wanted to protect her in a world that to be fair to her. And that's where I would say like my journey was in the sense of, really stepping myself up, and where we talk about own your impact, really speaking up, protecting my team, really talking about what it means to make a difference, to make sure everybody feels included. But then how can I make that difference of how do we leave this emotional baggage of our life experiences? I think my life experiences, I probably left them maybe when I turned, maybe 30ish, but then how can I make it sooner for someone else? Yeah. And I think leave that negative bias, as Dr. Soundarya initially said.
Wonderful, wonderful. Nothing like sharing lived experiences, and that's exactly what we are doing here, and we'll continue to do that. I'm going to talk about two different experiences in two different time zones. Okay, more than 2 decades ago, when PepsiCo was talking about building an inclusive culture and talking about all this diversity and all of that, we said that we need to change our process and change our process around performance management. And we said that we will have 50% business results weightage for business results and 50% weightage for people results. And people results was all about team, inclusion, and all of that, right? If you were a 4 on 5 on business results, but you were 2 on 5 or 2.5 on 5 on people results, you couldn't go up the ladder. You would be given a mentor, you would be asked to do something about it. Till you get on to 4 on 5, you wouldn't be moved. That's the important. And that was something that stayed on for many, many years. And that helped us to build that inclusive culture. But that was more than 2 decades ago. Very recently, I was at a startup tech company. They were in the mobility space. For obvious reasons, I'm not naming the company now. They are very much into building a diverse and inclusive culture. They are starting their journey. They want to do big things. And I saw many transgender people working there. And I had the opportunity to engage with them one-on-one. And then I looked around, and I was on their site visit at one of the depots. I looked around, I saw that they did not have any gender neutral washrooms. So I was having this in my mind saying I should ask this question. Why are you not having gender neutral washrooms? Right? But then before I could ask that question, this person told me, she said, Kannan, why do I need a gender neutral washroom? I can choose to go whichever place I want to go and nobody cares about it in this organization. That blew me out, right? And that I thought was a different culture of inclusion that this new organization is built in. So look at the two different ways of building that culture, building that, processes within the organization. I want to hear from you. What are the examples that you can talk about? What systems and processes work for you? And let's spend some time understanding what works, because these are real examples that we can talk about, because the reality about inclusion comes when rubber hits the road, right? And so what have we done differently in our organization? So I'll start with you, Swati, if you can talk about some of your experiences and what are you doing in your organizations in this space?
Yeah, so Kannan, thank you so much. So I will say at the start, as much as we would like any organization, and maybe this is my bias when I say this, the tone is set from the top.
Yeah.
Sadly, this is not one of these agenda that an ERG can kickstart and make big, because it needs a tone. And we started our journey. We were a much smaller organization and started our journey in 2019. And we did all the things that you have to do in step, which is we set up a council, got leaders, got allies, got the right things going. We also, because we were starting a bit late, could learn from the mistakes of others, and we didn't create any councils which were women only and so on, which were the early days missteps for a lot. And but we realized that one of the big ones that happened for us is when our India leader said, I want to get a target of having 50% of my one downs to be female. At that time, we were just looking at gender. And that really started to create the ripple effect. I know Dr. Soundarya talked about the ripple, and that was the ripple that we had. And that is when it started. From there to now, I know you talked about performance management. Every time we do performance management, we will check if it does not have gender bias, whether it is compensation, merit, bonus. So it is in the DNA. We will check if any woman going on maternity has had a ding in rating, as we call it. And this happens every day, every time. Yeah. It is part of DNA. It feels small, but that is the safety net that people have. But for us, we moved away from, we moved beyond gender. We went to transgender, and then we went towards, we got into mix with COVID, where one, we have multiple work shifts, and then we have remote workers and people in office. And then we realized that anything that we did needed to have all flavors, because you can't, otherwise we're not really making a program our own. Yeah. One very good example that I have is, we had daycare. Now daycare we know as a legal need, but how we stretch the logic is that if you're a woman who needs daycare and you have remote working, go to any daycare near you. You don't have to go to our authorized ones, and we will figure out a framework to get there. So we will meet you. So our theme is, we will meet you where you are, rather than you be in a space that we can take care of you. So find not creating programs which were going towards a certain set of people, but creating programs where everyone could be met has been our theme that we've worked with.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And this is what I started my conversation by saying, if you don't intentionally include, every likelihood that you will unintentionally exclude, right?
Yes.
That intentionality shows up.
Right. Yeah. And I think we continue to measure each of our programs on these stress tests. So we feel safe most of the times. And each time we get feedback, again, feedback loops are really strong. You kind of continue to improve. It is a long journey, and we don't think we will ever be there perfectly.
Absolutely. Aditi, what are your experiences? Anything different, anything new? And especially, I want you to talk about if there is anything that you've done around making your organization a psychologically safe space for people to feel free.
Absolutely. So Kannan, I think much like what Swati said, we do have our I would say the building blocks that we call, and then there are mechanisms to measure. But then the point that you make around psychological safety, I'll go into it a little bit more deeper. So the building blocks are similar to what Swati said. The only difference is we call ours business resource groups, not ERGs, because we believe that it is not about employee. Ultimately, inclusion means better business. It is for the business. It's a business decision. It leads to better business outcomes. So that's where we make a difference. So we have one for Pride, which is our LGBTQ plus community along with the allies. Then we have one for Enable, which is for people with disabilities. Then we have what we call Lead. We don't really have a gender specific one. Lead is simply all genders included, no matter how you identify. How do you become better leaders, and whether in your individual capacity or you carry the whole organization together. And then when we have one transversal one, which we simply call culture, which basically talks about, yes, there is an organizational culture, there is a mandate from the top, this is what you believe you are doing, but ultimately what the colleague experiences are the microcultures in the team. So how do you make that translation, and how do you make that transmission from what the organizational culture, vision, value is, and what is the microculture that someone might be experiencing in a specific team. So that's the broader piece. And then I think one of our most important metric, other than having a diversity slate at the time of recruitment and some of those numbers being there, similar to what Swati said, there is a calibration exercise that happens at the end of every performance cycle to see the bonuses, the comps, the kind of decisions we are taking are all without biases. I guess the one thing that we have added is what we call inclusion survey. It's a global survey, and of course India as a location is also included. And then we go through various aspects of what may make an employee feel excluded, and we try to kind of delve deeper into it. So there are certain yes or no questions, but then there are certain free text responses to allow us to get a more holistic experience of what actually the employees are experiencing. But the point that you are making on psychological safety, we have been doing a lot of work on it. And we have now started having that conversation, that when you say that you are including somebody, what do you really mean? Do you mean you simply invite the person to a meeting and you say, okay, I am inclusive? But does inclusion mean that this person can come in and ask questions to learn without being judged, can challenge the conventional wisdom in the room, without the fear of retribution, retaliation, or reprimand, or can freely ideate and be encouraged to do that? So psychological safety comes from these aspects, right? It is not about just being included in a meeting, and the meeting can be formal, informal. It could be your brainstorming session, it could be a huddle. So I think all these aspects come together to then build the psychological safety index, and then we kind of also measure it through our normal employee engagement surveys.
Wonderful. Would you also pepper that with some kind of reward and recognition programs?
Yes, there are reward and recognition programs, for some of the managers, but what we believe is we run rewards and recognition around innovation, but innovation has collaboration as a feeding into, and that kind of helps us assess the inclusion aspects of it.
The inclusion aspects gets weaved into that as well.
Gets weaved into it, because I think it was the keynote speaker who did say that DEA cannot sit in a corner. It has to get embedded in all other processes to make it work better.
Wonderful. Shalini.
Right, of course. So that the NatWest Group, we are very much strongly focused on our culture, our behaviors, and very importantly on our sense of purpose. The purpose for the bank is about turning possibilities into progress. and also very, very strongly in terms of our ambition. When we talk about ambition, we're not only talking about being the number one bank for our customers, but also our colleagues. So colleagues for us and how we make sure that it's an equitable workplace pretty much starts in terms of embedding it in the part of our purpose itself. Having said that, like every other organization, that we have been talking about, we have got very strong aspirations in terms of gender equality, and that is about having gender parity by 2030. And that has been taken as pretty seriously, because we kind of also measure against that, not only in our junior, but also across the broken rung into our senior leadership. So there's a fair amount of work that happens in terms of managing the gender slate across business units to see where we are in terms of our gender parity. But we all know, and since you were talking about PepsiCo, we know that Indra Nooyi kind of mentions that as women, kind of go through their career journey, it's in complete conflict with their biological journey. Right. So we know that when the broken rung is because of of definitive reasons. So as an organization, there's a strong focus in how do we set up equitable practices such that we can support our women colleagues through that journey. And like other organizations, again, we have hybrid working, we have support for crash and care and responsibilities. But I think one thing I want to call out, which is probably different and maybe of interest, is that we have a partner leave policy, which basically means that for mothers, we also got fathers who kind of take up 3 months leave at childbirth, and we are promoting or encouraging sharing of caring responsibilities for both men, women, and otherwise. So even for adoption, we have that policy. So I think that, I believe, in some way in India is enabling not only a very responsive inclusion culture within the organization, but also impacting our own communities at large. So when the men come back from their paternity leave, they are pretty much inspired by the journey of caring for the child, which they probably would have missed out on. And I think that, again, in a way is about not only making a difference to your colleagues, but the societies at large. So I think that's really working very well for us. So I'll call out about our parent leave, and it's not only about childbirth, but also about adoption. So making sure that our transgender communities, if they go for adoption, then they're also looking at supported through parental leave. So I think
wonderful.
Just want to call that out.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thanks, Shalini. Jaskaran, I remember you telling me that you are fairly new in this journey, and you're just kind of getting started, and you're very intentional about it, and that's great place to be in. But I also want to know from you, what did you see? Where did you see the need coming from? And then that getting translated into, yes, I want to do something about it, right? I just want to understand that before you can talk about what are the steps that you are planning to take for your organization.
Sure, Kannan. So some great examples being shared by the co-panelists. I'll probably answer this, and it is by a great quote. And this is in the spirit of, as we hear that, there has been a bit of a backlash, and I'm being really open and transparent when it comes to the DEI agenda, about certain comments being made as to what priority it has. And in that sense, when the same question was being asked to our CEO, her name is Shimara Vikramanayake, and she's the CEO of an Australian bank, and she's of Sri Lankan ethnicity. And her response was that diversity is not woke, it's smart business. And so we are not really talking about that we're catching out to certain, fashion trend. It's all about that it's a necessity of making sure that our teams can outperform, and want to make sure that our teams are thinking of, has a thought leadership which is different, and we are in a position where we are able to appreciate perspectives. So I don't think it is anything about the fact that what is the separate agenda, as Mr. Venkatesh also said in the beginning. It is not that. It is about, am I making sure that my staff is feeling safe? Am I making sure, are they being listened? Am I making sure that there is psychological safety, not just about the concerns, but it's also about new ideas. It's also about, how do we push the agenda ahead in terms of what the organizational objectives are?
Right.
So I think it's a necessity. It's a business necessity to make sure that we are thinking ahead and we are thinking in terms of what the strategy of the organization should be and how do we deliver across it.
Right.
One thing I really echo Shani's point, and I think because there is a great example of that, where even our organization has a parental policy which is gender agnostic. I think we are in our second year, and there was a huge uptake by the fathers, I would say. I had a good incident where somebody came back, and this is to what Shani's comment is, like, this makes societal changes. And where the person came back and said, did you know that my family did not believe that I can take so much leave and be responsible as a primary carer? They would trust me with the child. I was like, yeah, you are the father, right? You should be doing it. But it is about, where when they speak to their relatives, when they're speaking to their parents, it is something which is unknown, and it creates a conversation. It creates an impact. Okay, should we be thinking in those terms? All right, I am the primary carer, but my partner would go to work. And that's what my responsibility stands shared over here, and equal or equity in some sense.
Wonderful, wonderful. When I hear you talk about your experiences, I can reflect all of them as being true allies, taking action, being consistent. That's very important. And I think we are just about coming to the close of our time that we have been allocated. So I'd like to ask each of you as leaders, what is that parting message that you would like to give to the participants here, both in terms of your own, from your own experience, and also something like a legacy that you would like to leave behind? What is the parting, maybe a one-liner that you would like to share with the participants here? Anybody can go on.
I can start. I think you have to be intentional.
Yeah.
You have to be not afraid of failing. And because failing will teach you the exact things you need to do in your circumstances, in your business, in your organization, that no consultant will teach. Of course, you will get a lot of great ideas, but the solutions that you will develop will be unique for your organization, for your customer base, and to serve that customer base, the colleagues that you have in an organization, and you have to be ready for that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Aditi. Thank you.
I think I would probably want to say here that, as we all know, that change is the only constant. And for us, when we're looking at inclusion, we all need to be recognized for our merit. So making sure that we are constantly learning, and it is about what we bring to the table as individuals, which is more important than anything else, because what unites us is much larger than what divides us. Really.
Absolutely, absolutely. COVID has reminded us that, those who have gone through that period successfully are the ones who have been most agile, and the others have fallen by side, right? Swati and Jaskaran.
So let me start here. So I think I will echo what you said, Kannan. One thing that I have realized is listen and listen hard. Keep track of what data is telling you within your organization, because your organization is also a living, breathing thing, and its needs continue to change. Be very, very consistent. Build self-sustaining measures. Don't make it a person-centric project, and try to integrate across all people processes. It's not about doing something and making it a flavor of the month. IND, or what we now call as inclusion and belonging, is not really a vertical. It's a horizontal. It has to be part of the DNA, and that is how it has a life of its own, and it does not need us to feed it every day to survive.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Swati. Jaskaran, any final thoughts?
Sure. I'll probably have two thoughts there, if you allow me, Kannan. And one thought is something that I learned through my coaching journey is like to contribute before I consume. And I think that's a great way of thinking, that what is my contribution to make sure that We are driving the aspects of, as we have already said, like how do you make someone feel? And are they being heard? Are they being listened? Are you present just to respond? Are you present just to relive that relationship? And I think that's a great way if everybody starts thinking, having that joint agenda. And it may not, sometimes it is the case that should I interject because it's impacting my team member or it's because it's impacting me? But should you also do it when you are not the primary person, right? And would you do the right thing when nobody is watching? So that's my first take. The second I would say is like the concept of pay forward. When something good happens to you, and somebody made it right to make your voice being heard and make you feel included, would you take it further and contribute it to someone else?
Absolutely, absolutely. So wonderful. I think as a closing remark, I only want to say thanks to the Avtar team for bringing all of you together and talking about this subject, because this is truly walking the talk. And as I hear you, all of you speak all of these things, and I'm sure participants will agree with me that this really is what will take this journey of building an inclusive culture forward. Thank you, LV. Thank you for giving us that extra bit of time. And yep, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kannan. Thank you so much, dear
Thank you
panelists.
very much.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions. I think we can maybe take one, Kannan. So I'm just going to read out one. This is from Selva, who is asking, what can emerging startups less than 50 do as starting steps towards inclusive workplace? Few tried and tested approaches would be nice. And what can that be that starting point for a well-intended but usually busy founders to start on inclusivity?
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Selva. Selva is a good friend of mine. Thank you for being here. And thank you for asking that question. Any of the panelists, would you like to take that?
So, okay, I can probably say that, and I just said that in a way that eventually you're hiring for merit. So, when you're looking at hiring, you need to make sure that you drop any of your biases when you're looking at hiring. And we know that there are policies where we know what are called as blind auditions, where we bring in profiles without any gender, without any stereotype in a way to that, and that's when you kind of bring in the right person person to the foray, and that's really where we should continue to focus on.
Great.
I think that should become the business imperative now.
Great. Anybody else would like to add to it?
I would say that look at your whole intended customer base and see that in your team you have a voice for each segment of that customer base. I think that will be very important for you, especially if you are just starting with your business. Right. Don't go with, okay, am I looking for gender inclusivity or people with disability or economic backgrounds? No, you are simply looking to have as many different perspectives which you will need to make the entry into the customer base you intend to.
Right. And lastly, Selva, I think what is important is if you are a startup, as you start building your narrative around what is your DNA going to be, what is your culture going to be, let inclusive behaviors be embedded into that right from the beginning. And I think that will help you build other systems and processes that will make this, enable this come to life. Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. Thanks, LV, for this opportunity. Thank you all participants for being here. And congratulations and best wishes to Avtar for their Silver Jubilee year.